Okay, so our speaker tonight is Pastor Michael Carino. He is one of the pastors at the Christian Bible Church of the Philippines, I think just this year, no? And also a part-time instructor at the International Graduate School of Leadership, where I graduated last 2017. He was my teacher in theology and in church history, so I am very excited to hear from him once again tonight. He finished Masters of Divinity in Biblical Studies at the same school where he is teaching and ministering also right now at International Graduate School of Leadership. And he also took up his Master of Arts in Philosophy at the University of the Philippines at Diliman. He is happily married to Ate Ethel Carino, and they have one son, Josiah. Without further ado, let's welcome pastor, a good friend, a good teacher, Pastor Michael Carino.
Hello everyone, good evening. I am so happy to be part of your fellowship tonight and your gathering. And we have a very interesting conversation as well. Living better even when life is bitter, a theology of suffering. So as we realize what's happening in the world and in our nation today, we are going through a pandemic. Grabe, no? More than 9 million cases of infected people with this COVID-19 and almost 500,000 dead. I, for one, have many friends or people I know who have relatives or loved ones who died or who are now trying to survive the COVID-19 pandemic. And of course, financially, economically, I have friends who have businesses who are struggling right now. I have friends who are have been unemployed because of the quarantine and the lockdown that we are going through. So, sa madaling salita, ito daw panahon na to, itong krisis na to, maraming mga tao ang nagtatanong, kung mahal ba talaga ako ng Diyos at kung talagang mabuti ang Diyos, bakit ako pinapadaan ng Diyos sa ganitong mga problema at sa ganitong mga krisis at sa mga ganitong sakit? If God is good, and God is loving, and God is powerful, why does He allow us to go through pain and evil and suffering in the world and in our lives? So tonight we have a very interesting topic that has been a question and an inquiry of philosophers, theologians, and believers, and even non-believers throughout centuries. Talaga bang may Diyos? Talaga bang may mabuting Diyos? Bakit merong punong-puno ng kaguluhan ang mundo, punong-puno ng kasamaan at krimen at pandemya ang mundo? So in other words, tonight we'll be talking about a theology of suffering. Living better even when life is bitter. And we'll be going through one passage that helped me navigate this question and this confusion as well. So for many years, many centuries, this question of the goodness of God in light of evil has been asked by philosophers, by theologians. So ang tanong nila, if God is good and loving, why does He allow me to go through suffering and pain and crisis? So a lot of people proposed several answers. One answer is, perhaps there is no God. Perhaps God is not real. Hindi, kung mabuti siya at punong-puno ng kasamaan ng mundo at punong-puno ng kaguluhan ng mundo, baka naman walang Diyos. Others respond, may Diyos. Pero siya ang nagsimula ng lahat ng ito. He is the source of evil. He is the source of all these calamities and all of that. So itong Diyos na to ay hindi mabuti. Others will say, He is good, but He is not powerful. Perhaps He has no capacity to stop all this evil and all these problems and all these crises. Others will suggest na perhaps He is powerful, but He is not concerned at all. Wala talaga siyang pakialam sa atin. And so tonight, how do we navigate through those questions and those proposals? How do you respond to your son or to your friends or to your colleagues or classmates that ask those questions? Talaga bang mabuti ang Diyos? Ba't punong-puno ng kasamaan ng mundo? Yan, pag-uusapan natin yan. Let me invite all of us to just quickly ask the Lord to guide us tonight. Lord, I pray that as we navigate through this conversation and this difficult question, give us wisdom, guide us with your spirit, allow your word to come alive, feed our souls, and give us a compass, Lord, as we try to search your truth. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. So there are at least three truths we have to establish first before we try to understand what's the response, the appropriate response to this question. The first truth is this: we live in a broken world. Ang ating daw mundong kinatitirhan ay wasak because of our fallenness and because of our sins as human beings. Our world is full of corruption, full of injustice, full of crime and poverty and wars, violence and diseases. And because of human sinfulness, we have mismanaged our planet. Yan. All the viruses and all the pandemics and all the epidemics and all the diseases that came or resulted from a broken, mismanaged planet. So this pandemic is a result of a broken world. All viruses or all virus outbreaks, whether it's the SARS virus or the MERS virus or the HIV virus or the COVID-19 virus, are all consequences of how irresponsible human beings are destroying our planet. Another truth we need to establish tonight as we start this conversation is all creation groans for redemption. Yes, our world is broken. Yes, humanity is fallen. But we are waiting. We are groaning. The Bible says we are longing for the time when God will make everything new and God will make everything right. Yan. So that's the Christian hope. A time when God will restore all things, when God will correct every wrong, when God will wipe away every tear. But for the meantime, we hang on. Beautiful. All creation longs and waits for God to destroy evil, all pain, and all suffering. Truth number 3 that we need to establish as we navigate through this difficult question is God knows what He is doing. So when God allows us to go through suffering, whether it's a broken relationship or whether it's a health problem or whether it's a financial crisis or whether it's a pandemic, whatever suffering we go through, God has reasons for whatever He does. In other words, we simply cannot see the big picture. Mas nakikita raw ng Diyos ang buong larawan ng mga pangyayari kumpara sa ating mga malilinggit at maliliit lamang na mga explanations at mga perceptions. Any impression that the world is imperfect comes from our limited understanding of the larger context. Wow, galing. So everything that happens in the world is part of a grand plan by an all-wise God. So in other words, we can say that if something does happen that seems from our perspective to be utterly pointless, evil, or pain, or suffering, sa paningin natin parang walang kwenta namang itong mundong ito. Punong-puno naman ng mga problema at mga pasakit at mga kaguluhan. So it is possible that we are just focusing on a corner of reality because of our human limitations and our human finiteness. We cannot totally see the reasons and all what's happening behind the suffering we go through. Moreover, it's also entirely possible that what was intended for evil, God could turn it and intend it for something that is good, for ultimately good. So, maraming ginagawa at nangyayari sa mundo na sa tingin natin ay napakasama. Violence, murder, rape, theft, diseases, calamities, pandemic. Sa paningin natin, wala, karumal-dumal talagang kasalanan itong nangyayaring ito. But the truth is, behind the scenes, in God's economy and in God's perspective and God's wisdom, He is turning something bad into something good. Yun naman yung kwento talaga ni Joseph, no? Classic, no? He was thrown into the pit, betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, into Potiphar's house, and went to prison for a crime he'd never committed. So in all of those darkness and unfairness and injustice and brokenheartedness, Joseph probably was questioning and asking his corner of reality. Lord, ang daya-daya naman. Kala ko ba meron ka pa naginip pa, meron kang pangarap para sa akin? Why am I stuck in this dark corner? But he never saw the palace. That all these problems and challenges and pain that he went through, the suffering he went through, were all stepping stones to become the prime minister of Egypt. And so that's how life is. That's how our journey is. Marami tayong hindi nakikita, marami tayong hindi na ipapaliwanag, but God sees and God knows all things. And so life is full of things that will make you feel discouraged. Pressures, pain, problems, sickness that is difficult to get healed. Sabi ng mga doktor, wala na. Financial problems that never ends, broken relationships, failures, disappointments, and so on. The question tonight is, will you give up? Will you hang on when tough times come? Will you stay strong even when your faith is under fire? So kung kagaya niyo ho ako, medyo mabilis ho ako ma-discourage, no? Kumbaga, mabilis ho akong mawalan ng gana at mawalan ng pag-asa. So I needed the grace of God when I go through discouragements. There are just moments when I would just break down into tears and say, Lord, parang hindi ko na kaya. I cannot do this anymore. I often ask myself, how do I go on when troubles and hardships come my way? How can we go on living better even when life is bitter? Ayan, si Pastor Tim, medyo alam niya yung storya ko. No? My wife has a sickness that has no cure. Ang tawag ng mga doctors dun is autoimmune disease. No? And my wife had his first stroke attack, mild transient ischemic attack na stroke at the age of 27. So at the age of 27, in a span of 3 years, she has had 5 episodes of mild stroke. And this sickness is fatal. She can die anytime. So, merong one night na talagang umiiyak ako sa Lord. Sabi ko, Lord, grabe, patong-patong na to. Wala akong pera para sa gamot na ito. Tapos yung misis ko may sakit. She cannot be a normal wife for me. And then my son was diagnosed with autism. So sabi ko, Lord, ang daya, hindi ko na kaya. Ayan. So that was one of my darkest moments. And parang life is unfair. Like a Joseph moment in the pit. You know what God did? God showed me a vision. I am not into Pentecostal theology, but for the first time in my life, I saw what looks like a Blu-ray video clip that God showed me while I was praying. No, God showed me my wedding day. And in my wedding day, He showed me a short clip of my wedding vows. And in that video clip, in that short quote-unquote vision, I saw myself saying my wedding vows. You know, grabe, no? I remember we memorized our vows and I said, my wife's name is Ethel. Ano? Ethel, wala akong maraming pera sa bangko, wala akong sariling bahay, at wala akong sariling sasakyan. Nangihiram lang ako. Pero meron akong Diyos. Magiging okay lang tayo. So that's it. No? And the vision ended. And then I was crying. I was really, really crying. And God was somehow whispering in my heart. And He said, Mike, kita mo na. Hindi naman kita pababayaan eh. Hindi kita ilalaglag. Ako bahala sa'yo. Hindi kita iiwan. And so afterwards, I had this strong sense of peace. Sabi ko, Lord, sige. Good or bad, joyful or painful, in sickness and in health, for better or for worse, for richer or for poorer, I will trust you. So tonight, we'll be talking about that. How do we live better, even when life is bitter? So tonight, we'll talk about a theology of suffering. And one passage that I reflected on is very powerful to me. It's found in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 16 to 18. This is from the Apostle Paul. He says, therefore we do not lose heart, though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So, we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Because what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. So, in 2 Corinthians chapter 4, Paul was describing, sharing his nature of ministry. Actually, he was defending his apostleship to the congregation in Corinth. No? And so he says, the marks of my loyalty and my faith in Christ are the sufferings I went through. People heard the gospel, but there were a lot of hardships, and God was glorified as the gospel was advanced. Yun yung sinasabi ni Apostle Paul. Binugbog ako, pinakulong ako, tinraidor ako, iniwan ako, at nireject ako ng maraming mga tao. Minura ako, at binastos ako. Pero dahil sa mga pinagdaanan kong kahirapan at mga pasanin, na itaguyod natin ang salita ng Diyos. The gospel was advanced. Many people were saved because of the hardships I went through. That's 1 Corinthians 4. Grabe, no? And so Paul was telling his readers that we should not lose heart. Tingnan nyo nga ako, yung pinagdadaanan ko. In other words, because we see things differently compared to how the world sees, we must never give up as believers, even when our faith is tested or when hardships come. Because a proper understanding of pain and what happens when we go through suffering will help us endure tough times and never give up. Ayan. So, tonight, we'll be going through 3 reasons why we should live better even when life is better. And here's the first reason. 1, because outer pressures build inner character. Galing, ano? Sabi ni Apostle Paul. Because, therefore, we do not lose heart, though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. Parang sinasabi ni Paul, panlabas, tayo ay parang bugbog na at nangihina na at puro sakit at puro pasanin. Parang hirap na tayo. Outwardly, we are wasting away. Pero sa panloob, may ginagawa ang Diyos na malalim, at may ginagawa ang Diyos na maganda, at may ginagawa ang Diyos na maayos. Binabaklas ng Diyos yung mga ugali natin na hindi dapat. It's like, inwardly, we are being renewed day by day. It's like the work of the Spirit in our lives, part of the suffering is an internal deepening, an internal cleansing, an internal purging of our pride and of our arrogance and our selfishness and all our sinfulness. In other words, napakahalaga daw na tayo ay pinapadaan ng Diyos sa pressure and pain and suffering. Kasi doon lang yung panahon at yung mga oras na naaayos yung ating puso at nababago yung ating ugali. In other words, there is a character formation that happens. There's a spiritual formation that happens when we go through pain. Something good happens inside even when we go through bad. Ang galing. In other words, sinasabi nila, oo nga naman, how can you develop courage when you don't go through adversity? Yan. So the virtue of courage happens only when you go through adversity. The virtue of compassion is deepened in your character when you go through suffering or there is suffering in the world. And the virtue of generosity, for example, happens only when there is a lack or a need in the world. So one reason why God allows evil and suffering in our world is that it is required for certain kind of growth, moral growth and character growth in us. That makes sense, Na ang paghihirap daw at pagdurusa produces heroes among us. Di ba? Itong pandemic lang na pinagdadaanan natin, Heroes. The crisis brought out the best in us. The rise of heroes during this pandemic. Schools and churches converting their buildings into shelters for frontliners. Health workers risking their lives to save others. Business owners donating food and medical supplies, not thinking of their own profit. Yan, Kung wala itong pandemic na ito, wala naman tayong gagawing kabayanihan. Pero dahil dumadaan tayo sa crisis, the best in us come out. Sabi ni D.L. Moody, God will not use a man mightily until he has hurt him deeply. Yan. So, I think that's one reason why evil exists and suffering and pain exists in the world. It's because God teaches us. Parang ang Diyos daw has a school. God has a school, and the school is brokenness. It's a school of brokenness. Basagan talaga, no? Basagan ng puso, basagan ng yabang, basagan ng pagiging makasarili. And not all of us graduate from that school. God is still enrolling us in that school. This is number 2. Temporal pain bring lasting reward. Paul says, for our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. Ang daming contrast na ginamit niya dito, no? Sabi niya, light, magaan, momentary troubles are producing a great and eternal reward. Parang sinasabi ni Paul, his afflictions, his trials and suffering, he used them as light and momentary. Mga pansamandaliang problema at mga pasanin. Mga pansamantala, no? Magaan at pansamantala lang sila kung ikukumpara sa mabigat at pangmatagalang gantimpala ng Diyos. God's reward is lasting and heavy. The word for glory is doxa, no? So doxa is the word for heaviness. Ito daw gantimpala ng Diyos. This eternal glory is heavy. Ang bigat kung ikukumpara sa mga napakagaan nating pinagdadaanan sa mundo. Our light and temporal troubles are nothing compared to the heavy and eternal rewards that far outweighs all our problems. In other words, God rewards those who endure and never give up. But we have to be willing to pay the price, to hang on, to hold on, to trust on. So the difficulties of life are meant to make us better and not bitter. Ito naman yung pangatlo. Visible problems bow to unseen realities. Galing. Sabi ni Paul, so we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. But on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. So he's saying temporal matters, they fade away, but eternal realities are forever. So when we fix our attention to what is visible, nakikita natin kapangitan ng mundo, kahirapan ng buhay, at mga kadiliman na nagbumabalot sa ating kapaligiran, when we focus on the negative, when we focus on the brokenness, and when we focus on the burdens that we go through, we will easily become discouraged. In contrast, Paul refuses to look on the things that can be seen by the naked eye, but rather he focuses on the invisible providence of God, the invisible sovereignty of God, the things that we cannot see with our naked eye, the invisible grace of God, the invisible wisdom of God. Yun yung mga hindi natin nakikita. Yun daw yung mas totoo. So the verb he used here is we fix our eyes. No? So sabi niya, the word here is skopeo. It means to make it your aim, to make it your focus. To set your eyes on the invisible, eternal realities of a new and future world with God. Yan. So when we focus on the invisible realities, a future, better world with God, or the reality of a good God that cares for me even when I cannot feel it or see it. Focusing on such realities make the pain and the misery of this present life seems to be light and temporal compared to the joy of being with God. Yan. So, we respond to bad circumstances by what we see. Yan daw minsan ang sekreto sa buhay, no? The secret to life, the secret to success and flourishing and excellence in life, to greatness in life. It's not really about how much you have. Dami kong kaibigan, mayayaman, wasak ang buhay, ang gulo ng pamilya, ang lungkot-lungkot ng buhay. It's not even about how much you know. Marami kong mga kaibigan, valedictorian, summa cum laude, laging nasa top 10. Pero ngayon, nagduro siya. Ang gulo-gulo ng patutunguhan ng buhay nila. Because life is not about what we have and how much we know. It's about what we see. It's about perspective. This is what separates the intelligent from the wise. This is what separates those who fail and those who win in life. It's perspective. Merong ang kwento, no? Dalawang shoe salesmen pumunta sa isang bundok na puro tribo ang naan doon, puro mga tribo. Kasi they're looking for a market to sell their shoes. And so, they saw the tribes and nobody wears shoes. Walang gumagamit ng sapatos. So, salesman number 1 calls the factory and calls their boss. Boss, nako, lugi tayo dito. Wala tayong pag-asa dito. There is no market here. There's no business here. Mababankrupt lang tayo dito. Bakit? Sabi ng boss. Kasi walang gumagamit ng sapatos eh. Ayan, ano? And then the salesman number 2 called the boss, the same boss, and said, Boss, nako, may market dito. May negosyo dito. Malakas. Kikita tayo dito. Bakit? Wala pang may sapatos dito. Nako, kikita tayo ng malaki. Wala pang nagsasapatos dito. It's the same scenario. It's the same things they saw. But they saw it differently. It's perspective, no? Others, the salesman number 1 saw problems. Salesman number 2 saw opportunities. Para ding naalala niyo yung 12 spies that Moses sent to the promised land. When they were about to conquer the land, Moses sent 12 spies to report. The 10 spies said, sabi nila, nako, ang lalaki ng mga higante. Ang lalaki ng mga pader. Kakainin nila tayo, parang tipaklong. Matatalo tayo. Hindi natin kaya ito. The other 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb, saw the same thing. They saw the giants, they saw the land, they saw the prosperity of the land, and they said, kaya natin to. God is bigger than the giants. God will give them to us. And so the other 10 spies saw the same thing, but they saw a different thing. But the 2 spies saw something that the others did not see. They saw God above the giants. And so the secret to life is what we fix our eyes on. Yun yung sinasabi ni Apostle Paul. What do you see? Do you see nothing but the present reality of a fallen world, of a miserable world filled with pain and suffering? Or do you see beyond the evil and the darkness and the pandemic that we go through? Ayan, no? So this means that when we see a higher reality, our lives are anchored. That's why we smile at the storm. That's why we sleep amidst the problems. Because we have a deeper anchor, a deeper root for our joy and our peace and our fulfillment. Meron tayong mas malalim na pinaghuhugutan ng lakas sa gitna ng mga krisis na pinagdadaanan. Kahit ang buong mundo ay panic at punong-puno ng takot and people are afraid and anxious and panicking, we, on the other hand, see a higher reality. We see a deeper truth. And that is God, you know? God's truth and God's goodness and God's grace and God's mercy and God's plans. There's a better, truer order than the one we experience in the world. So every event in the world, good or bad, contributes to a greater good, the progress of humanity. Para daw, may nagsabing philosopher, minsan daw, kapag ka nakakita tayo ng painting, masyado tayong malapit sa painting, nakikita lang natin yung mga dumi at yung mga dark spots, yung mga blemishes, yung mga black areas at corner nung canvas, nung painting. But when we step back and see the larger masterpiece, we see a great work of art. Ganun din daw sa mundong pinagdadaanan natin. Sometimes we just see a small patch of dark shades and gray areas and a dark corner of misery. But when we step back and when we see the whole painting in the eyes of God, when we see the broad context and the broad perspective with God's eyes, we see a great work, a great plan, and an all-wise God behind the great work of art. Someone even once prayed a beautiful prayer. Ang galing nito, no? Sabi niya, I asked for health that I might do greater things. I was given infirmity that I might do better things. I asked God for strength that I might achieve. I was made weak that I might learn to obey. I asked for riches that I might be happy. Instead, I was given poverty that I might be wise. I asked for power and the praise of men. I was given weakness to sense my need of God. I asked for all things that I might enjoy life. I was given life that I might enjoy all things. I got nothing I asked for, but everything I hoped for. In spite of myself, my prayers were answered. I am among all men, most richly blessed. Wow, ang galing ano? Talagang marunong ang Diyos eh. Minsan pinapadaan niya tayo sa mga problema at kabigatan at krisis at pandemya at mga patong-patong na problema at sakit sa ulo. Because He knows better than us. He knows that it will bring out the best in us. Why? Because outer pressures build inner character. And temporal pain bring lasting reward. And visible problems bow to unseen realities. Yung misis ko hanggang ngayon may sakit pa rin. Wala ngang gamot eh. And so, yung anak ko ho, may therapy, may autism pa rin. And nag-i-improve naman siya. Magagaling ho ang mga therapist din dito sa Manila. Alam niyo yung favorite time of my day is during night. Ito, ganitong oras, we watch TV together. No? Netflix, we will watch. And sometimes we'll just tell jokes and tickle each other and just have fun until we go to sleep, do our devotions and prayer. Pero may mga rare moments po that while we are watching, my wife will sleep on my left shoulder and my son will sleep on the right shoulder. So pareho sila. Hindi ako makagalaw. Natutulog sa balikat ko. And then when that happens, I will cry. Iyak lang ho ako ng iyak. Kasi sa totoo lang ho, I am not a man of great faith like others. I probably belong to the 10 spies who see the giants, who see that life is really filled with mess. Life is crazy and life is unfair, filled with injustice and pain and suffering. Sometimes that's all I see. But sometimes God invites me to see a bigger picture, a better reality. That God is good even when life is bad. That God is just even when life is unfair. And that God cares even when I go through difficult times. Minsan mo, yun lang talaga ang susi sa buhay. Hindi naman patalinuhan, hindi payamanan, hindi rin pagalingan. Hindi naman ako magaling eh. Pero magaling ang Diyos. So when we hang on to God, we can live better even when life is better. Let me close this time in prayer. Lord, thank you, Lord. You are good. You are faithful. You have a better plan. You know better than us. Lord, help us to trust you. Whatever it is we're going through, good or bad, joyful or painful, bitter or sweet, teach us to hold on. Teach us to hang on. Teach us to see a higher reality, better and deeper and higher than the one reality that we go through now. Teach us, guide us, change us, lead us. Amen. Amen. Thank you very much, everyone. Good evening.
Tim, nakamute.
Ayan, sorry. Thank you, Pastor Mike, for that very encouraging and inspiring words, no, from the Word of God, and of course with your testimony. I myself have witnessed that as well, as your student, and I hope that those words will, for as a church now, will be able to encourage us to trust God continuously and to understand the perspective of God in us, through the working of the Holy Spirit. And so tonight we have actually some questions here that we would like to throw Pastor Mike, and that maybe you can also enlighten us with. So here are the questions. I'll be the one to kana lang to ask the questions, okay? So is it possible for a Christian to have a lifelong journey of suffering for his purpose? So I don't know who asked this, but someone posted a question, no, maybe for you. Is it possible for a Christian to have a lifelong journey of suffering for his purpose?
Oh, that's a beautiful question. So essentially, every life, all of us actually, have a lifelong experience of good and bad, joyful and painful. So, ganun talaga ang buhay, ano? It's always a polarity of both. Hindi pwedeng puro joyful, puro bliss, puro happiness. Hindi rin pwedeng puro suffering, puro pain, and puro problems yung ating buhay. It's a mixture of both. Parang day and night, good and bad, joyful and painful. That's how God designed human life to be. So it's finite, it's fleeting, it's painful, and it's full of things that we cannot understand and explain. But overall, it's meant to be lived to enjoy God, to glorify God, to know God, to love God, and to love others, to enjoy others while it lasts. Ayan. So, yun talaga yung mystery ng buhay. No? Merong temporality, merong finiteness. We will not live forever on this side of the life, in this side of our lives. But we become, so once we realize that life can be short and can be painful and can be troublesome, we become wise. And when we become wise, we know how to find joy and we know how to find fulfillment amidst all the suffering we go through. Yeah. So yes, there's a lifelong experience of both, no, joy and pain.
Yes. So at least with journey, God is with us and He's encouraging us, helping us through. Sa 2 Corinthians din, there's no temptation or challenges that is far beyond us that we cannot bear, that God will give to us. So thank you for that encouraging answer as well. May isa pa po, Kuya
Okay.
Mike, Pastor Mike.
Tim,
Yes.
can I read it? Good
Sige,
evening,
okay.
Pastor Michael.
Good
I am
evening.
Rhoda.
Hi.
Our second question is, what are the possible reasons for a Christian who finds it hard to get rid of bitterness with his or her suffering?
Okay. So that's true, ano? Sometimes for a moment in our lives, so all of us go through fire, we go through suffering, we go through difficulties. Some of us will come out better, but not all. Sometimes some of us come out bitter. Yeah. So that's the question. But the bitterness does not have to stay long. So bitterness is allowed. So that's why we have books in the Bible like Lamentations. Lamentations is a book about bitterness. It's a book about groaning and doubting. It's a book about agonizing. Lord, why did you allow this? Next to the book of Job, Lamentations is the most heartfelt book in the Bible. Of course, the book of Psalms has their share of mourning and anger and bitterness and lament. Yan. So yung panaghoy ng ating mga puso. So that's allowed because one, that's part of our humanity. God designed us and invites us to go through a period of grieving. No? So pag namatayan ka, you grieve. Hindi pwedeng masaya. Namatay nga eh. When nalugi ka o niloko ka o dinaya ka or a crime was committed against you, ni-rape yung anak mo, ninakaw yung pinaghirapan mo, sinunog yung pinundar mo, or nagulo, nagiba lahat ng pinaghirapan mo, there's a period of grief and lament. Yan. So that's why we experience bitterness, when you're brokenhearted, when you're betrayed, when you are rejected. So that's healthy actually, when you are more real and more human, when you are more honest to God, yung talagang umiiyak ka at sumisigaw ka, tumingi ka ng saklolo at nilalabas mo lahat ng galit at inis mo sa Diyos. So all of us need a good dose of that kind of grief. Bitterness is a form of grief, no? However, nagiging unhealthy na siya kapag we are not able to bounce out of it. Ayan. So, there are two unhealthy ways of dealing with grief or bitterness or disappointments, no? Or brokenheartedness. One unhealthy way is we dismiss it right away. Okay na ako. Wala, naka-move on na ako. Hi, hello, praise the Lord, God bless you. That's unhealthy. Why? Because we live in pretension. Parang we become a church of pretenders. Puro happy all the time. Walang may problema. Parang hindi totoo. Yeah. So you suffer in silence and you suffer alone. Because you are surrounded with happy all the time people. And that's not healthy as well. No? Puro dismissive. Oh, ba't ka umiiyak? Dapat masaya ka kasi Christian ka eh. Yeah, that's wrong theology. No? Kaya minsan nanggigigil ako pagka pinipigil lang umiyak yung mga nasa punerarya. Oh, born again ka, di ba? Dapat di ka umiiyak. Dapat masaya ka lagi, happy all the time. Where do we get that teaching? That's unhealthy. Another form of unhealthiness when we deal with grief or disappointments or brokenheartedness or bitterness is when we stay too long. When you don't allow yourself to get healed, that's also unhealthy. And God does not like both types of life, no? Yung buhay na nagdi-dismiss ng pain at yung buhay na kinakarir yung pain. Yun. So dapat merong season of grief, may season of mourning, pero meron ding season of starting new, beginning again, starting a new chapter, and moving on. Yan. So, that's maturity. Ang tawag din maturity. There's a book that came out, no, very, very powerful by, I forgot the author na, no? The author of Changes That Heal. No? So, the book is Necessary Endings. Very powerful. I just read that about 6 months ago. And it helped me heal, no? Heal from all my from the betrayal I experienced, to let go of the hurts and to let go. So sabi niya, sa buhay natin, meron mga necessary endings. Nagsimula yan ng bata pa tayo. No? We let go of the toys we love kasi teenager ka na eh. You don't need that toy. So masakit, pero you have to let go. We let go of the pets who died. We let go of our childish ways and we move on to adulthood. So we let go. No? That's part of natural growth. If you are stuck in a season or in a chapter where you just grieve all the time, hindi healthy. Yeah, so it's like you have to let go. Yeah, merong letting go. Magpaalam sa mga abusers. Magpatawad ng mga wounders. Lahat ng mga nanugat sa'yo at nanakit sa'yo. You have to forgive. You have to let go. And then you have to say goodbye to people who died or people who left. And you just say, until we meet again. Yeah. So that bitterness does not bondage or enslave us. So I don't know if that helps, pero so that's my response to that. Job was able to bounce out of his disappointments. David, so di ba, he was fasting and praying and mourning and grieving in sackcloth and ashes for several days, asking God to make his baby come to life again. Sabi prayer yun, Lord, buhayin mo naman yung anak ko. And then God did not do anything. So he took a bath, ate his lunch, went on. Yeah. So thank you for that question.
Okay, thank you, Pastor Michael. For our third question, what if one refuses to accept the brokenness or not see that God is breaking him or her, or blinded by his or her own self, does it make him or her a lesser Christian?
Ah, that's another good question. So some people, it takes a while. It takes a long, long while for us to heal, or for us to mature, or for us to change. So sabi nga natin, di ba? Sometimes God allows suffering or brokenness
Mm.
to form our character. No? So, but for some people, hindi talaga hindi nagbabago eh. No? So tagal, no? For a lot of reasons. Some people are more wounded than us. Some people have more abuse experience compared to us. So while all of us are equally sinful, we are all sinners, we are all wounded, we are all broken. Not all of us are equally in pain. Yan. So hindi equal yung ating pain na pinagdadaanan. Yung sugat, yung lalim, the depth of our wounding is not equal. Some of us grew up with abusive families. No? Some of us grew up with loving families. That will make a difference in your journey later on. So, may handicap yung mga tao na mas maraming sugat. Mas maraming pinagdaan ng abuse. So, it will take them longer for to heal, to overcome, to mature, to get better or to change. Mas matagal. But there is hope. Yan. So, mas matagal nga lang, but they will change. Mas matagal nga lang, but they will heal. That's why we need healers in the church. No? So, while we are all wounded, some of us can become wounded healers. Sabi nga ni Henry Nawen. No? So that means the more we are exposed to love, the more we are exposed to loving people, the more we are exposed to healers in our lives. These are mentors, pastors, disciplers, coaches, group leaders. The more we have more of those healing communities, as Larry Crabb will say, the safest place on earth should be the church. We have to become a healing place where people are healed from their wounds and their hurts and their hang-ups. Yeah. So if a church is like that, the faster people heal. Pero if our churches or our groups does not have that healing power, wala nagmamahalan, hindi naman kayo nagpapatawaran at wala nakikinig. Puro happy all the time. Mas matagal yung healing na kasi people hide. They hide their addictions, they hide their hurts, they hide their abuse. Kasi lagi masaya eh. Walang space, walang atmosphere for brokenness and for honesty and for confession and for vulnerability. Yan. So, we can just share the pain we're going through. Yan. Kaya, people who have mental health problems, who have depression and suicidal, what do? We send them to the experts. Doon ka sa psychiatrist. Doon ka sa counselor. Magbayad ka na lang. Kasi sa church, walang tutulong sa'yo. Yan. So, that's very sad, no? So, but we have to understand that's our calling. The church is God's arm and God's feet and God's voice to the broken, to the wounded, to the hurt, to the bitter. So, their healing becomes faster when they're surrounded with more people who love and who are kind, who are gracious, and who are generous in their suffering, in their struggle. Recently, I gave a talk, LGBT, homosexuals, gay, lesbian, transgender, in a big church. 400 people came. And some of the people there are born-again Christians, but have problems struggling with same-sex attraction. Some of them are lesbian and gay and transgender. They came to me. Sabi nila, Pastor Mike, the fastest way for us to change and to heal is when Christians are more loving than hateful. Yan. Sa akin, eureka moment. Sabi, this is it, no? This is The church is supposed to be a healing community. Yeah. So when people are broken, when people are bitter, we have to learn. Natututunan naman, church namin, we're learning it. We're learning how to do counseling. We're learning how to do life groups. We're learning how to do listening. Grabe. Nakakatuwa. I'm not a listener. I grew up in a family. Nobody talks. Nobody listens. You're on your own. You suffer in silence. So, I got married and it's troublesome. Kasi hindi ako marunong magmahal. Hindi ako marunong mag-relate. No? But we can learn. We can learn. That's a good thing about church. No? We learn. So we're learning. Because we have a lot of people in our community, in our church, who are suicidal, who are depressed, who are bitter, who are angry. And the church is clueless. No? Clueless. How do we help people? That's our ministry. It's the ministry of the church. We are in the ministry of helping people. And so might as well spend money. How do we do it? Yeah, so we hire experts, teach us how to listen, how to love, how to heal others. Yeah, I hope that was helpful. Thank you.
Well, nice, Pastor. Thank you. For our fourth question, okay pa, Pastor?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Hanggang 10 o'clock daw eh.
Sige po. For our fourth question, what are some biblical ways to help us get rid of the bitterness or handle the pressure, especially when the life becomes overwhelming?
Good. Very good. So one, we look at stories, no? We look at stories from the scriptures of people, men and women of God, who went through a lot, who went through tough times, and then learn how are they able to cope? How are they able to survive betrayal, murder, crime committed against them? How were they able to survive rejection and calamities? So when you look at the story of Joseph, how do you forgive your own family who wanted you dead? Paano mo gagawin yun, di ba? You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. How does this happen? Or you go through the story of David, when a King Saul would hurl spears at you. Sinisibat ka ng mentor mo. Gusto kang patayin ng leader mo. Gusto kang paalisin ng pastor mo. Naiinggit sa'yo yung mentor mo, yung discipler mo. How do you survive that? Tago ka sa kuweba dahil gusto kang patayin. How do you survive that? How do you survive an adulterous affair? You plotted for the murder of Uriah and you snatched Bathsheba to be your own wife. How do you survive that? Nobody survives that, but David did. A man after God's own heart. Yeah, so we look at stories like that. Or you look at a Job. Nasunog lahat ng negosyo mo. Namatay lahat ng anak mo. And you have this skin disease that has no cure. Dogs lick your wounds. How do you survive that? How does faith endure that? Magtitiwala ka ba sa Diyos? When your wife says, why don't you curse God and die? Mamatay ka na nga. Isumpa mo ang Diyos mo. How do you survive that darkness? Yan. So when we look at stories of men and women of God who went through difficult things, we learn. No? It's parang their lives help us navigate. Yeah. So that's the role of the Bible in our lives. No? It's like a compass. So we will not get lost. And then, in your relationship with people, you look for 1, 2, or 3 few good, trusted, reliable friends who will listen to you. Hindi pwedeng you and God lang. You have to walk with someone. We are all co-journers, ika nga. We need to surround ourselves with Apostle Pauls who will guide us. We have to surround ourselves with with Barnabas who will encourage us. We have to surround ourselves with Timothys that we will mentor and we will guide. And so, pag wala tayong ganun sa buhay natin, yun, wala. You suffer alone, you suffer in silence. You become bitter, and you become disappointed. That's how Judas fell. That's how Judas was able to backslide away. No, he was bitter. He was bitter. Tatampo siya dahil the finances are not being handled his way. Jesus was spending it left and right and he was not being heard. Di ba? Tatampo siya. Laging si James, si John, tsaka si Peter ang kasama, hindi siya kasama. So, and that's how Judas happened. Parang nagtampo talaga eh. So yung mga tampo natin, tampo sa Diyos, tampo kay pastor, tampo sa church, tampo sa life group, tampo sa pamilya, those bitterness and those disappointments will become solidified unless we walk with someone who will listen to us, who will guide us, who will help us. So it's the grace of God talaga eh. It's the grace of God. And then, of course, mga realizations. You know? Like, for example, I am an angry person. I have an anger problem. Munti kami maghiwalay ng asawa ko because I'm angry all the time. I got this from my father and he got that from his father, sa lolo ko. So, if high blood pressure and diabetes is inherited through our DNA, through our genetic coding, so yung genetic tampering, spiritually and emotionally, meron ding genetic transference ng mga baggages from our generations. So, anger and short-temperedness. So, that's one of the generational sin that I inherited. So I'm angry. I'm an angry person. Of course, I grew up abused and verbally abused and wounded as a child, bullied as a child. So punong-puno ako ng galit. So I'm in ministry and I have this struggle of anger and being ballistic and being explosive. So I went through counseling. And so who counsels pastors? Di ba? We do the counseling, right? But I went through counseling. Kasi my wife cannot stand it anymore. So, can you imagine? I'm in ministry, maghihiwalay kami. So, I need to rescue my marriage. I went through counseling. Anger management. And then, of course, the straw that broke the camel's back is my son. Sabi niya, tatay, I don't like you. Naiyak ako eh. Kasi, masakit pala yun, ano? Hindi ka gusto ng anak mo. Sabi ko, anak, why don't you like tatay? You're always angry. I don't like you angry all the time. So, that's my turning point. I sought help. I'm not yet perfect, no? Nobody gets totally healed talaga. We don't get totally healed. But what happens to us is when we receive layers and layers of healing. So, parang onion, ano, napipeel. So, one wound to another. Ayan. So, I have many wounds growing up as a child. Ano? Father wounds, mother wounds, childhood wounds.
I think nakatay glitch. Let's just hang on for a bit. Basig mo okay ra ang connection ni Pastor. Or Rods, basig gusto nimo mag-recap.
Recap. Okay. So, good evening, everyone. Since wala pa si Pastor, no? Magwan lang ko, mag-share lang ta about sa atong topic tonight. Live better even when life is bitter, no? So, it's a theology of suffering. So, first is outer pressure builds inner character. So, sa atong mga pressure sa kinabuhi, mas ma-build ang atong character, for example, kanang naatay mga suffering through sa atong mga coworker or whatever, no? So through that, mas ma-love na to ang atong mga enemies. No? So instead of bitterness imong ma-feel towards a situation, mas ma-feel nimo nga mas pakita nimo ang bigger picture of instead of hating the person but to love the person more. So man siya ang inner character. Pastor Tim? Pastor Tim?
Hello, Tirods. I'm contacting with our
Sige.
speaker.
Sige.
Kasi
So,
mo,
continue
paano ko
lang.
reconnect ko to siya?
Continue lang
Connected
ko
na.
mag-share sa mani.
Disconnected.
Okay.
Ayan.
Sorry.
Okay.
What happened?
Pastor,
Okay.
take it away.
Hi, Pastor! Welcome back!
Thank you. Nawala yung internet ko for a while.
Okay lang po. So, let's continue po.
Yes.
So, do you have additional po na isasabihin po regarding sa question number 4 or we continue to another question which is question number 5?
Yes, we can continue with number 5.
Okay, so question number 5. Should the church leaders handle a situation when one of its members is hurt by another member?
Wow. So parang may conflict and maybe unforgiveness or difficult to reconcile, ano? Okay, so if the pastor is involved and the pastor is having conflict with one of the members or one of the leaders, and they should settle it among themselves first. So yun yung Matthew 18, kayo muna. The instruction in Matthew 18 is to initiate, no? Don't wait for the brother or the sister to approach you. Siya muna mauna, siya may mali. The instruction in Matthew 18 is if a brother offended you, you approach him or her and tell him or her what the offense is. Yan. So kahit ikaw yung naagrabyado, ikaw yung victim, you have to initiate the reconciling process. And so, but if it did not work out, no, parang ayaw makinig or ayaw magpatawad or ayaw humingi ng tawad, you need to ask someone to intervene. Yan. So that's the next step to that. Ask a brother or a sister in Christ to intervene, to help bridge and to help reconcile. Mahalaga na yung invite nyo ay walang kinakampihan. Yan. Kasi pag may kinampihan, it will not really be helpful. So that's it, ano. Ngayon kung hindi pa rin nakatulong yung meron ng invite, that's now the time when you need to approach the leaders. You need to invite some of the leaders, not all, not the entire council, no, naman, but maybe some of the leaders who have more wisdom on how to deal with the matter. Ayan. So that's the parang external process. Internally, something's happening in the emotions, something's happening in the heart. So, like you have to, for example, if I am the person, I'm having a hard time with another person, I have to examine why am I having a hard time to forgive. Yan. So, bakit ako nahihirapang patawarin siya? Bakit parang natitempt na ako na lumipat ng church instead na magstay dito sa church na mahal ko? Dahil lang sa taong ito. Ayan. So, you have to examine your heart. Kasi if you are not able to deal with the unforgiveness and the bitterness, kahit na saan ka pumunta, whatever group or whatever church you transferred to, the same problem just stays there. The cycle of fleeing a conflict, or the cycle of fighting, and the cycle of insecurity, and the cycle of unforgiveness just is with you. Parang it's like a baggage, you know, yung mga basura dala-dala mo kahit saan. So you need to deal with that. You know? Ask for help, ask for intervention. Minsan hindi nakukuha sa ano lang parang hayaan mo na, kalimutan mo na. 'Di ba? Tayo mga Asians, mahilig tayo sa ganun, no? We put it under the rug. We don't talk about it, hoping that it will go away. Pero it's there. The pain is there. The bitterness is there kasi hindi pinag-uusapan. So mahalaga 'yon, mahalaga na you have to settle it among yourselves first. And hopefully, cooler heads prevail. No? So ang isang caution dyan is don't talk when emotions are high. Kasi wala mangyayari. Sabi sa Proverbs, no, the words of a wounded man are like words to the wind. So that means marami kang sasabihin that you will later regret when you confront or talk to the person out of anger, out of emotions. And so most of the time, mahalaga na meron munang space. Pero huwag masyadong matagal. Kasi nga, ang instruction sa atin, do not let the sun go down on your anger. You know why? Kasi the longer it takes, the more blank space, no? So the more days and days or hours and hours of speculating. Ba't niya kaya sinabi yun? Bakit niya gaya ginawa yun? Sino na kayang kinakausap niya? Sino na kayang tinetext niya? Bakit niya pinost sa Facebook yun? Etc. No? So nagkakaroon ng mga blank spaces, nagkakaroon ng mga false speculations, false assumptions, tsaka wrong conclusions. Kasi hindi kayo nag-uusap eh. Ganon din sa marriage, no? Pag di kayo nag-uusap, nagkakaroon ngayon ng empty ground for bitterness to be planted. So yung maliit na bagay, lumalaki tuloy kasi natataniman ng mas marami pang emotions. Kumbaga nagagatungan. The more you are left to yourself, thinking and thinking and thinking, yun, marami ka ng imaginations, saka fantasy. So, pag nagkita na kayo, lumala na yung galit mo. At mas malalim na yung bitterness. Kasi tumagal na eh. This is difficult, no? Kasi sometimes, masyadong malalim yung sugat. Parang ayaw mo munang kausapin, di ba? So, very complicated yung dynamics ng forgiveness. No? But at the end of the day, you have to understand that forgiveness is not a gift you give to the offender or to the abuser. Forgiveness is a gift you give to yourself. You're happier, you're more peaceful, you're more free from any burden or baggage kasi you have forgiven. Yun. So isang caveat, sometimes if the abuser or the offender or the person who committed sin against you is violent, no? Parang it will bring more harm than good if you talk. Sometimes ang advice ng mga counselors, stay away. Yan. Yun din ang advice minsan sa mga marriage, ano, pagka nagkakasakitan, if there is domestic violence. Kailangan hindi makukuha sa usap. Kailangan umalis muna. So, uwi ka muna sa inyo. So sometimes distance and space can be helpful. Pero temporary lang. Temporary distance. Lalo na if your life is in danger. So talking will not be wise. Yan. So pero for Christians, generally, talking will be the wisest thing to do. Nothing good happens when you stay silent.
Yes. Okay. Uh, we still have two, Pastor. Are you
Oh,
okay?
sure. Oh, good, good.
Okay. For our second to the last question is, how can we help, say, family members or friends who are struggling for pain and suffering, and they don't believe or trust in Christ anymore? And how can we do so without exerting any pressure or persistence?
Ah, they're struggling and they left the faith. No? So they said, I don't believe in God anymore. I'm not a Christian anymore. And so these are the Joshua Harrises in our midst. No? So that's a good question. So on top of my head, I would respond if I have a brother or a sister in Christ who decided to leave the church and leave Christ because of a lot of reasons, maybe pain, bitterness, or disappointment, or wounds coming from fellow believers or whatnot. Number one, I will extend grace. So that's our role. No? We are recipients of grace. We need to become bearers of grace. We have to become generous givers of grace as well. So grace, what is grace? It's unmerited favor. That means giving kindness, showing love, even if the person do not deserve it. Undeserved favor and undeserved kindness. That's grace, no? Because that's what God gives us. No? Naalala niyo yung kwento ng prodigal son? He doesn't deserve the home and the love and the generosity of the father anymore. He messed up. He ran away. He decided to turn his back on all the blessings and all the love that he has. So the father there is an imagery of God, and the prodigal there is an imagery of all of us. Whether it's a non-believer coming home to the father and becoming part of the family, or it's a believer who went away and coming back again, or still away. So the father's heart is always looking and waiting and waiting. Hindi pwedeng yung story ng prodigal, very radical yun, very out of our anti-culture yun. That's a counter-culture story. It's not very Asian, In the Asian culture or even in the Jewish culture, may puno na ang salop. Nakakatatlo ka na, strike 3 ka na. Yan. So, hindi na kita anak. Yan. So, meron tayong ultimatum. But that story breaks any culture, breaks any human understanding of the father's heart. No? He just keeps waiting. He just keeps longing. He just keeps loving. Generously, graciously, undeservedly. He just lavishly embrace. Kaya yung anak, he understands culture. Yung anak, he understands protocol. He comes home and says, Dad, treat me as one of your slaves. Yeah. Not your son anymore. But the father, throws him a robe and a ring and sandals and kissed him. Never stops kissing him. In spite of the foul smell. Amoy baboy siya. So that's us. Our sin. Baho-baho. Dumi-dumi. So for us, we become who we worship. If we worship a God like that, generous, radical, generous love, we become who we worship. When we become that to our fallen brothers, whatever the fallenness is, whether they committed adultery, destroyed their marriage, or they committed apostasy and backslided, and turned their backs on Jesus Christ, or whether they turned to homosexuality or transgender lives, or whether they wasted their money into gambling and whatnot, we have to reflect the generous, gracious heart of God. Ganun lang talaga eh. We are bearers of grace. Scandalous grace. You know why it's scandalous? Because people don't deserve it. In the human economy, You don't deserve it. You are, di ba? Pagka merong nag-commit ng adultery sa church, subukan niya magsimba. Walang papansin sa kanya. Walang kumakausap. Kasi hindi natin kaya yung grace. We are bent on the law. Magdusa ka dyan. Or a brother or a sister in Christ decided to become LGBT. So, one of your disciples become lesbian, confess to you. Or confess to the group. Di ba? The following week, walang kumakausap. We will ostracize them until they stop going to church. Or a person says, I'm gay. I have a boyfriend. So, what do we do? Di ba? So, these are scandals of grace. Or a person says, I no longer believe. I'm not a believer anymore. Kaya nga nung si Joshua Harris nag-out, he confessed, sabi niya, I'm no longer a Christian. You know how, so this is a litmus test talaga of Christianity. You know how Christians responded? We bullied him. We bashed him. It's like we want to bully him until he comes back. Parang, how does he come back to that? Di ba? And that's a challenge, no? So it's like we have to walk the narrow path. How do we treat backsliders? How do we treat sinners? How do we treat non-believers? How do we treat people who are different from us, or people who hate us, or people who disagree with us? What would Jesus do? What would the Father do? This is difficult, even for me. Kasi may mga biases tayo, may mga prejudices tayo, di ba? So kami ng misis ko one time, nag-uusap kami, we read an article. What if my son becomes gay? So, and he's a pastor. A pastor wrote about one day if my son, who grew up in Sunday school, discipled in the church, confessed to me and came out, Dad, I'm gay. I'm getting married. Will you come to my wedding? So, diniscuss namin ng misis ko, sabi ko, will you love your son? What would Jesus do? Yes. Hirap, no? Or if my son, anak ko matalino kasi, na-expose sa philosophy, What if one day he says, Tatay, I think I'm not a Christian anymore. I don't believe in God anymore. What do you do? Thank you. Next question. Last na ba? Ang gaganda ng mga tanong niyo, pero ang ihirap.
We still have a last question, Pastor.
Oh, okay.
Okay, this will be the last now. A while ago, you said that there should be a healing community. Can you differentiate a healing community with what others perceive the church as a hospital?
That's a good question. So what is the church? So I think there's no dichotomy, So some people say the church is a hospital for people who are sick. Others say, no, it's a military camp for people who are soldiers and warriors for Jesus. No, it's not a army camp. It's not a hospital. It's a family where people are loved and celebrated and accepted, etc. No, it's not a family. It's not a hospital. It's not an army camp. It's an organization. It's a business organization of people who are selling the greatest product in the world. And the greatest sellers of this product are Christians who evangelize, etc. So there are many images of what the church is. My proposal is there should be no dichotomy. The church is all of this. The church should be a breeding ground for people who will stand for the faith, trained and equipped to engage the world. Yeah, so we are, in a sense, we are a training camp for warriors for Jesus. So these are images that we use. the church should also be a family of people being celebrated and loved and accepted uh, as they are. The church should also be not only as a family or a training camp for warriors, but it's also a hospital for people who are wounded and sick and needing and rejected and has nowhere to go to but us, nowhere to run. And they have been wounded emotionally, psychologically, spiritually by the dark forces of this world. So talagang tatakbuhan nila tayo as a healing place, a recovery facility for them to live again, to hope again, to find joy and meaning in life again after they have been beaten by the world. So in the Bible, there are many images that are like that. The Good Samaritan, yeah, who just went out of his way to heal, and Jesus is teaching on who is my neighbor, and the stories of conquest and defense, and the stories um, of people being transformed by the power of love. Uh, so of course, the Book of Acts, no, the first Christians have that. That's their first conflict, no pala, no. They chose 7 elders who are wise and who has this fear of God to deal with the problem, no. Some of the church people are neglected. So during their time, the church is very, very strong. Unlike us, the church today is very, very strong on evangelism, on worship, and Bible distribution. During their time, they're very strong in helping the poor. They're feeding the hungry every day. They're helping the poor. They have a feeding ministry all the time. They have uh, people who are lepers and people who are sick and prostitutes who are rejected by their families. The church would just embrace them and take care. Immigrants, immigrants. These are Greek and people who have no home. Yeah, so the church will take care of them. Yeah, and they started with the ministry of caring. So doon nagsimula yung mga deacons. Yan, sila Stephen and all. So nagrereklamo yung ibang mga members ng church, parang nakakalimutan yata yung aming daily food delivery, parang gano'n. Uh, so the church is like that. We have to become God's representative on earth, whether it's healing people mentally, psychologically, emotionally, relationally. A lot of broken people today. Or whether it's equipping people to become better witnesses for Jesus. Or whether it's making the church a place of love and family. And people just felt like, this is my family. There's no other place like home. Yeah, sarap na, di ba? When the church becomes like that. I remember a story, there was this church, and one of their members became a widow. So yung nanay, she has a son. The son is a little boy, about 5 or 6 years old. So he's now growing up without a father. And the whole church felt like we need to do something about this. Lumalaki yung bata, walang tatay. So the men in the church, the fathers, decided to adopt the boy as their son, one of their sons. So every time they will go out, fishing with the son, basketball with their own children, they will bring the boy. Ask the mom, can we bring him overnight sa bahay kasama yung mga anak ko, ganyan. Or sama namin siya sa outing namin, puro mga kids, father and sons. Yeah. So one day the mom stood, after many, many years of doing this, yung anak niya felt like he has many fathers. The mom stood in one of the prayer meetings and said, my son has no father, but this church, each one of you became his father. And this church has become our family. Yan. So, very moving talaga yung story na yun, And that's why there's no place like this church. This is our home. This is our family. Ayan. So, can you imagine how powerful that is? No? We are no longer known for what we hate. Kasi, pag sinabi ngayon Christian, ano yan? Anti-gay, anti-science, anti-evolution. Yung mga, puro anti yan eh. So we are known for what we hate, di ba? Anti-atheist, anti-abortion. Basta, we are known for the things we hate and the people we hate. But what if we are known for the things we love? The people we love. And the people we help. So that's a good image of our vision of the church. It's a hospital, it's a family, it's a training center. Yeah. And it's also a good, well-oiled organization. Kasi we need the organization. We need excellent business leadership, management skills. There's no shame in combining the management expertise of our people and the faith and the spiritual components. Some churches, very spiritual, pero mismanaged. Walang accounting. But some people are very, very well managed, pero walang spirit. It's very dry. Nobody loves God. So it has to be a combination of all of this. Thank you for that question. That's beautiful.